And as a leader, as you're creating an accelerating business, as you're creating a business where you really want to grow your entire portfolio, revenue, gross margins, all those things, fundamentally you have to have the people who are the best in the field. And since there are many early stage startups here, the first 5 people you hire are probably the most crucial people in your company. And any mistake there is very, very expensive. Now, this goes back again to the intuition earlier I had described. How do you hire? How do you select the best in the field? And there, again, as you're interviewing, as you're selecting the first team, you have to ask pretty insightful questions. How did this person deal with adversity? How did this person deal with situation when there were no answers? Did they innovate or did they get bogged down? How do they work with the team? Do they really, are they unselfish or they're too self-centered? All these key things starts playing a key role. Again, doesn't matter, early stage, mid stage, medium size, large, no, doesn't matter. These attributes become pretty important as you're trying to create a company which will scale. So when it comes to talent, the scalability of your company depends quite a bit in terms of what talent you have really hired in your company. And I have a slide coming up which will go into the details here. So vision, as I said, very key. Keep it simple, keep it powerful, and keep it scalable. Vision is something you should not be able to execute in just 1 year. It takes probably 3 to 5 years to execute, wherever you want to go. Values, as I said, how you run your business, what's the code of conduct for the entire executive team, management team, the company that really describes how you are. You're not leaving broken glass, you're not leaving dead bodies, you're really taking everyone as you're growing the company. Talent. If you look at the companies and you say, why some of the companies get stuck? They come to a certain point and they get stuck. Generally what you'll find is that they're not moving with the life cycle changes. As I said, life cycles in last 30 years was more like maybe you had 3 to 5 years to get a product right or to establish a business. Now we're looking at more, maybe 1.5 years to maybe 2.5, 3 years type of a life cycle. What the change really brings is that the need for right talent, the need for you to attract the right talent is even more stringent. If you hire a wrong person, if you attract a wrong person to the job, by the time you realize you have made a mistake, 1 year is gone. And your life cycle is now 3/4 done. So that's why I emphasize quite a bit. As you're trying to grow a company, focusing on the talent attraction, developing, mentoring them, growing them is very important. And many companies actually, nowadays, they're so focused on just executing their release cycles, day-to-day work, that they're not spending as much time, as much attention in mentoring and growing engineers. Growing, whether it's engineers or marketing or product management, doesn't matter. These are very key fundamentals. If you're building a company as a leader, you really want to make sure that there is significant attention paid to these things. And as I said earlier, in HP, this was a best practice, absolutely a best practice. That's why people stayed for a while. You had divisions after divisions, which took the company in 1984, 85 from 3-4 billion. By the time 2000 came along, they were 42 billion. And 42 billion was after divesting Agilent. So that's the kind of growth these practices bring. Risk-taking. In the business, from all the experiences I've had, there's nothing I know where you can create a large business without taking a risk, especially in our industry. And as you look at your own career, I described to you on the personal side, there were quite a few risks which we took. And over time it panned out. On the product side, I'll use a specific example. When I was at Eltion got acquired with Nortel, in I think 2003 timeframe, we were conceiving the fastest firewall. And one of the ideas was to take the control plane of the firewall and really accelerate through a layer 4 through 7 switch. And many people said that cannot be done, but we kept at it, the team kept at it. In fact, there are some folks here who worked on that project. It was amazing to see after about a year or so of work We created world's fastest firewall. This was, I think, 2004 timeframe. And in the project, what became clear to me is that you have to surround yourself with people, especially if you're working around in the technical products, with engineers who are dreamers. And I always describe two different classes of engineers. There are dreamers and there are executioners. Dreamers are engineers who really have amazing ability to think broad. They can connect the dots very well. And they may not be your best coder, they may not be best executioner, but when it comes to coming up with a solution to a tough problem, these engineers thrive. As a leader, as you want to grow your company, you want to make sure you have a combination of the two. If you are personally a very execution-oriented leader, you will tend to surround yourself with very execution-oriented engineers or marketeers or product managers or manufacturing types. That's a red flag. Because what will happen is you will succeed for a while. If you're a manufacturing company, that may be an okay formula. But most of the companies are not just manufacturing. Most of the companies have products, innovation, and then of course there's process-driven things. So you want to make sure that you definitely have a very, very strong combination of both these so-called dreamers as well as executioners. Because dreamers come up with some amazing ideas. But you also need to know where to stop them, because they are not the people who will finish the product, right? So you need to have, as a leader, that strong combination of the two. But in terms of risk-taking, breakthroughs, these folks play a very key role. And these are all lessons, as we led companies or programs, we learn. I think in Silicon Valley, most of the folks are fairly aware of the innovation part. I think all of us live that, encourage that. Differentiation, since many folks here are really starting their own companies, focus a lot on that differentiation. And again, you have to surround yourself with folks who are going to question you, who are going to really critically ask you for you to give details, so you can truly evaluate whether this is something which will stand the test, whether this is something which will give you barrier to entry or not. And that's what I call validation. Everything you do needs to have that level of validation, that level of critical thinking. Otherwise, what ends up happening is you spend 2 years, 3 years of your time only to find that there were not enough barriers to entry. And that becomes, end of the day, as I said, maintain a sharp industry radar, because the industry is moving much faster. In fact, as I interact with the entrepreneurs, what I'm finding is, I'll have a meeting about one idea in social media. 2 weeks later, somebody else has something similar going, and it's so critical. That's why I think, as Naveen said earlier, networking is even more important in this type of an environment where things are changing fast, life cycles are moving along, pretty fast. Now, when it comes to growing the company, there are 2 ways to grow it: organic or inorganic. Let me go into each one by one. If you have the talent in your company and there are engineers who are keeping up to speed, you are making the R&D investments, your company is making investment in you, that means that everyone is developing skill set for the next generation ideas, for the next generation of breakthrough and innovation. If you're doing that, then organic growth can work. Now, this is what we saw in HP. When I said HP went from 3 to 4 billion in '85 to 42 billion in 2000. It was all organic. But what did they do? They actually invested a significant chunk in R&D. They actually invested a significant chunk in mentoring, guiding, developing people. So that formula worked, and then they would do this mitosis cell division. As a division becomes 500 million, HP will split that into low end, medium range. As the medium becomes 500 million, they'll split that into medium and high end. And then they will overlap the divisions to compete with each other. This way, they cannibalize each other rather than the competition cannibalizing them. So they had the formula on organic. Now, as the technology is moving faster and faster, this organic growth becomes very challenging, because you don't have the people. You don't have the people who have the skill set. For example, if somebody has done networking for the last 20 years, it's very unlikely they will kindle a passion for social media. Not they cannot, they can. But generally, we all get set in a certain way as we work. So the key issue for most of the companies becomes, if your strategy was organic, you reached a certain growth, and your people, you did not invest in the people, you didn't really invest in developing new skill set, there's no way they'll give you bright ideas of the social media or Web 2.0. That stuff takes time. Now, on the other hand, if there's a company which hires folks from colleges and they have lived social media, these guys are, they had smartphones when they were 12, they lived that life. I think that's what we're beginning to face. So in that situation, your organic strategy will not work. That's where the inorganic kicks in. Now, when I joined Ixia, Ixia is a very successful company, has always been very innovative, very strong technical products, was a leader in wireline IP testing technologies, solutions. Now, one of the key things when I went in there, I realized that we are not into wireless. So getting the company going towards wireless, and LTE was just starting at that point, and Wi-Fi, those areas were very important. And yet we didn't have the level of expertise at that time, which will push us into RF performance management, RF testing. So inorganic was the right approach, and that has done very well for the company in terms of growth and profitability. So as a leader, you have to make the call where, as a leader, you push organic. Now, if you push organic, are you really making the investments with the people? Do they have the right skills? If not, go inorganic. Now, when you go inorganic growth, you're really acquiring. Now, acquisitions are very difficult to execute well and integrate well. So as you go into the acquisitions, I want to discuss briefly pros and cons. And since we have limited time today, I just want to give you a little highlight, and then any of you are more interested, we can go a lot more deeper into this topic. When you're looking for the companies, number one thing to look for is the culture. More acquisitions fail because of mismatch of culture than anything else. So generally in my case, when I interact with people and we're evaluating something, I always look at, is this company, is there impedance match between their culture and our culture? Number one. Number two is, no matter how much technical due diligence you do, there are things you're going to find out which you had no clue. And that's how these things go. And the reason for that is, 20 days, 30 days, not enough to know everything. So be prepared. And that's something, we all learn from experiences. You do next acquisition in a better way. But as much diligence as you can. But again, having said that, there's no way you will know everything. Number three, whatever is your business model, gross margins, growth, expenses, keep the acquisition in line with your business model, because once you change your business model with these acquisitions, if you are a high margin company and you suddenly start going towards consumer low margin products with distribution, by the time you realize that's a wrong call, you would have wasted 4 or 5 years. So it's always good to impedance match the business model. And the last thing I would say is that the go-to-market is a lot tougher as you go into the new ideas than it kind of appears. So whatever company you acquire, if they have a go-to-market, if they have a successful track record, that's significant value in terms of, as you are evaluating the company. The pros and cons are that if you can do organic the way HP grew in 80s and 90s, you keep uniformity, you keep gross margins, you keep culture, people get promoted. On the other hand, if you bring folks from outside, it changes the dynamics. So as a leader, you really have to think through, which way you want to go. And as for many of you who are successful startups, as you're evaluating the company who's acquiring you, you apply the same principles in the reverse side. Is this, the acquirer, do they have the right culture? Is it a place where, our business model will accelerate? Do they have the go-to-market? So everything I said, you can go from the other side. Now, one point I want to focus quite a bit is that as a leader, as you're building the company, I saw a lot of harmony as we were growing in 80s and 90s in HP. This word is an important word, harmony. As a leader, you have two ways to do it. There are different examples of leaders. You can find leaders who are very, arrogant. They are very driven. It's their way or a highway, but they're so bright. They are so right. They generate the results, and it's okay. But you really, these are very few and far between. But you see a lot more examples where someone had more an approach where you lift all the boats, you create the harmony. You'll see more success long term. So HP leaders, the way they groomed us, was a lot more driven by harmony. You could not become a manager in HP if you didn't have people skills at that time. They will not make you a manager. You can be a great architect, you can be a great engineer, but they will not make you a manager. Now, as a result, over those 15-20 year period, you had amazing depth in the bench. The SVPs, the VPs, the EVPs, there were just some amazing depth that we looked up, and we actually were, all of us who were growing up at that time, we just respected that bench so much because there was amazing harmony. And my experience is that any executive team which doesn't have harmony cannot scale. They may have a short-term quick success, they cannot scale. So I focus a lot on in terms of those values, all for one and one for all. That value, if you can create in your company or in your project team, in your startup, it will pay dividends big time. People will not work just for a paycheck. People will work for a mission. And when you can turn everyone who's working on a mission, you get 10 times the productivity. And for entrepreneurs, this harmony is a very, now to create the harmony, you yourself has to be a low ego leader. Because you have to bring everyone together. You have to bring everyone together, you have to listen, you have to create the environment where there's an honest discussion, there's intellectual honesty, and if somebody is attacking your idea, and though you may be CEO or you may be VP, that's perfectly okay. If you can create that, that will fundamentally give you a stronger DNA for future success. Again, I'm sure for all the examples I'm giving, you can always give an example where somebody was absolutely opposite, but they were just so bright that they created great success. But for me, I think this word of harmony as a leader is a very important word. So in summary, and then we'll go into the Q&A because I think question and answer will bring a lot of key points. These are the 5 key points I want to end my presentation with. As I said, first is passion. Whatever you do, whatever career you're pursuing, whatever startup you're pursuing, just have so much passion into it because that will help you generate the energy to overcome whatever barriers you're going to run into. Drive. No matter what situation you are in, if you have the drive, you will overcome it. And drive is also coupled with the perseverance I described earlier. That if you have a drive, generally you'll have the perseverance, you'll deal with rejection, you'll deal with failures, and you will get up again and run. And everyone who's successful knows that generally you fall 2-3 times before you finally make it happen. So drive is fairly critical. Listening ability. As a leader, as a company, as a project team, just make sure that you are setting an example on listening. And invariably your ideas will get better and better because somebody tweaks your idea, there's a debate, and there's a decision. That decision will always be superior. Harmony I talked about. I think if you can as a leader create harmony, that's a tremendous asset for the company. And the last key point I would say is humility. No matter what you do, you are going to face failures and some not so successful projects. If you have humility and you led the company that way or you led your project team that way, generally you'll find that your team will rally behind. Whereas if you are arrogant, the rats will jump the ship pretty fast. So in conclusion, what I would say is that I always use river as a good example. When the river hits the mountain, it doesn't pound the mountain again and again. It actually cuts on the side. It winds, and the path may be a little longer, but ultimately it finds its path. So as you're guiding your company, you're guiding your project teams, guiding your startup, be like a river. Even if you're running into something, find the path, cut across. Even though it might take you a little scenic route, longer route, you'll get there. And if you are at a point where you're not excited about your job, or you're finding it kind of boring, introspect, make the change. Whatever change you need to make it, because what you'll find is if you make the change, you will get the drive, the passion, the energy, and you will reach your goals. So with that, I will pass it to Naveen.
Do you have folks from the Nagpur?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Good morning.
So they missed the whole thing?
This is making up.
Thank you, Atul, for great insight and wisdom. I really appreciate it very much. So I'll get started with a couple of questions and then we'll open it to the audience. I'm sure they will have lots of them. So one of the things I wanted to ask you is, looks like you took a different path being in Silicon Valley, where even if you work for a large company, and I meet a lot of folks from there who come after 3-4 years what to do. So you still stuck around in HP and didn't get, I guess, attracted with the I call like entrepreneurs are dream chasers. You were saying it's like chasing a startup dream. So you can. So any.
I think that's an excellent question. As I said, there is no one formula. Everyone has to find their own formula, and in that formula, you have to feed in what's your family situation. You don't copy other people's formula. Don't look at somebody else who just made 100 million and now you want to chase 100 million, because that's their formula. So in my case, we had young children. As I said, we were a single income family, and I didn't feel at that time that it was worth taking the risk. Number one. Number two, HP was a place where there was a lot of entrepreneurship going. Remember, if you can go from 4 billion to 42 billion, 10 times in 15 years, there are lots of startups being created. So we were, our need for entrepreneurship, that's why I call it entrepreneurship. Our need for entrepreneurship was very fulfilled. And while we were doing the entrepreneurship, we were also being developed as leaders, managers, with some of the great mentors. So that combination was satisfactory. And again, in my book, if you have achieved great success, but you have lost your family along the way, or you lost your kids along the way, it's just not worth it. That's why I say everyone's formula has to be different. You don't need to copy. And life will give you plenty of opportunities. If you're entrepreneurial, whether you are in a big company or medium-sized company or small, doesn't matter. You will find opportunities. And in my case, that's how it played out.
Thank you. One more question. So you have a strong background, obviously network infrastructure and even most recently also. So what do you see as the opportunity? Of course, 3-4 years ago, if someone had asked, you could have said also OpenFlow and SDN, etc. And already there is one acquisition by VMware of Nicira, which was obviously mind-boggling for many folks, still for a company which just got the product out for what they paid. So what do you see, let's say if there are any infrastructure-oriented entrepreneurs in the audience, you would, any ideas or any trends you would suggest to them?
So I think you're going to see a lot of, we are passing through a very significant change in my book. And the change is that what used to be done with powerful ASICs and custom chips now can be done with off-the-shelf chips. The operating systems have virtualized. Networks, control planes are now being done with SDN architecture. So fundamentally what you're seeing is a change. The way you had Solaris and Sparks, 10-15 years back, they gave way to, operating system, Linux and off-the-shelf chips. Same thing is happening to networks. What that means is that the value is moving up the chain. Value is moving towards applications, value is moving towards how well you really accelerate a business somewhere. So that change will bring opportunities. But the opportunities will have to be monetized in a different way. It may not be selling a box, it may be licensing the right software, the right functionality in a virtualized environment. So I think there is significant change coming, but the key thing entrepreneurs have to focus on is how do you monetize from this change is the key part. Not just the technology part, but as SDN comes in, as there is deconstruction of monolithic architectures into more virtualized, cloud-based, SDN-based architectures, where would you make money? I think that's the part you really have to think through. But there is significant change we're going to witness. And what you're also seeing is that what used to be, where people used to spend $10 million on infrastructure, now they will spend maybe $1 million or maybe $2 million because they will pay as they go. They will not buy a massive infrastructure. They will pretty much go towards a utility model. They only buy what they need. When they're done, they move on. So business model changes are going to be far more intrinsic and far more crucial than so-called hardware and software.
Thank you. So we'll open it to the audience now. Anyone has a question? Okay.
So Atul, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Good to see you again.
Good to
So,
see you.
You know, hardware is written by humans, software is written by humans, therefore by definition, you're gonna have product issues. You and I spent a lot of time in the trenches. Why don't you share with the team, some of the best times you have is when you do have hardware and software issues and the relationships you build with the customer thereafter.
Absolutely. And yeah, Nick and I have a lot of lot of experiences in that area. The customers actually don't care who designed the hardware, who designed the software. What they care is who's providing them the mission critical service, which is always up. And Nick is actually very experienced in the carrier service provider business. I think overall the hardware increasingly is commodity. You can get the multi-core processors. People are putting on the drawing board now. When you look at the numbers, it's just mind-boggling. So I think hardware increasingly is going to be commodity. So what it really becomes then is who provides with this commodity hardware, software and solutions which are well managed, runs like a utility, pay-as-you-go model. And overall, there will be a lot of value. Whoever provides the solution and provides end-to-end serviceability, end-to-end performance, there will be significant value. And there will be a lot of warfare between large companies, system integrators, who will emerge as this so-called utility computing model takes on. But my experience has been that whichever company provides people who work closely with customers, work closely with understand their uniquely understand their needs, proactively develop the roadmap, all the basics we have all learned, they will still be winners. Just bringing things together, as separate modules may not it will still take a while. So there's a lot of opportunity for companies to pull things together and deliver the entire solution with mission criticalness and serviceability and those type of things.
So as a founder of an early stage startup, I'm trying to bring on the first salesperson on board. And I'm looking at the qualities that you have out there, and I completely am aligned with what you have to say. What I'm finding it hard is to find harmony and humility in salespeople. They have excellent numbers. They have excellent numbers that they have produced. And my concern is, would they be the right fit for the team, or would they, put a dent on the team? What's your experience in hiring the right salespeople?
Actually, the best sales guys I have found in my career are very methodic, very customer-centric. If their company's product is not going to get the job done, they will tell the customer, I don't want to sell this unit to you. So I'm actually, my opinion of the best sales guys is a little countercultural. I find that the best sales guys are not only methodic, process driven, phenomenal follow through, and truthful. Because over time, even if you lose a deal, um, the customer actually will, I'll tell you a story which will bring this point. And Nick might remember this because he was in Nortel at that time with me. So this particular sales guy is a very passionate sales guy. I remember one day, he and I, we were going on a customer call, and he was driving on 101 near Mountain View, about 15 feet behind my car. He was very close. And when we reached the customer, I said, "Why are you driving that close to my car? If I slam a brake, you're going to run into me." He said, "Well, I'm a race car driver, and I can't see too much gap between cars, so I always leave only 10 feet." Anyway, this guy was so passionate. There was a deal we were pursuing at that time. We went to the customer, and customer said, "You know what? RFP came out. You guys didn't make it. Your competition has a better offer, and you lost it." And he said, "Mr. Customer, can I get one more shot?" He said, "No, I've already made a decision. You're done." He says, "No, give me 30 minutes of your time this Wednesday." I think this was a Monday. He said, "Wednesday, can I come 30 minutes?" He said, "Sure, I'll give you 30 minutes and that's it." Now this guy was so methodic, so passionate, so driven, that he actually found out that this particular decision maker was very avid fly fishing guy. In the next 24 hours, he read every book there was and learned as much. So when Wednesday he went to see the customer, he didn't talk about the Ethernet switching and routing, BGP, OSP, none of that. He actually talked about fly fishing. He had a 30-minute appointment, but the guy was there for an hour and a half. So this customer said to him, he said, "I'm very impressed. You have intricate knowledge of fly fishing." He said, "Sir, actually, frankly speaking, I've never fished. I've never fished, but I'm so committed to you that I read a lot in the last 24 hours, and that's my truthful answer to you." This customer said, I'm very impressed with your commitment. I'm not going to give you the entire deal, but you get half of the deal." So when you find the best sales guy, don't go by the flashiness. Those are flash in the pan. Long term, you really need people with great follow through, good technical knowledge to the degree that they know when they're lying, right? Because a lot of times, best sales guys will never lie. They will always tell the customer where they stand because they know their reputation is not tied to a company. Remember, sales guys are not tied to a company. They are tied to their own reputation because they'll be selling another company's product next week. So my advice to you would be that whatever core values you have set, stick with them. And trust your intuition as you're interviewing them. And the more they are talking sharp and giving you a line and there's answer for everything and there's no failure, those should be red flags. Okay.
Anyone else?
Yeah, although it was very interesting that you referred to intuition. Seldom do we hear personal stories about intuition because it's very abstract. Your examples were about red flags. Can you give examples where you chose a green flag or where you chose right?
Sure.
Yellow flags.
Yeah, I think the way, when I say intuition, actually it's, when we are thinking about a problem or about a deal or about a project, you are getting data from many, many sources. You're reading quite a bit, you're meeting people, you are evaluating industry data, analyst reports or analysis within your own company. But in addition, you're gathering data which may not be as black and white. It may be more, maybe the body language you saw in the deal, or maybe things you observed during the negotiation, which cannot be quantified. All those things feed into your, as I said, your subconscious processing. So, as you're evaluating an idea or a company, many times, in my case, I would look at those things, and we were working on a couple of acquisitions in the last, say 10 years or so, And there was one particular situation where, as we were evaluating this particular deal, as I worked with the founder and the executive team, there was doubt whether this technology will really scale, or it has the quality. And I ended up sitting one-on-one with the founder in this situation and asking the questions, and that's where the eye contact, the sincerity, the depth of knowledge, all that convinced me that even if there's an issue, this team will be able to resolve the issue. So that there was a red flag that turned into green flag in my mind, based on that conversation. So I think the key message I'm giving is that it all comes down to, as you're interacting, pay a lot of attention to not just the words and the slides, but what is not being said. And ask insightful questions as you probe. And sometimes the body language will tell you that there is a problem here. Sometimes the sincerity of the person will put you towards the green flag, though you went in as a red flag. All those things as a leader are important.
Hey Atul, thanks a lot. That was very, very helpful. You emphasized and mentioned the mentoring and coaching that you received at HP when you were there. Later, when you left, did you pursue, getting that kind of coaching and mentoring or some kind of a support system? And if you did, I mean, what role did it play? How did you go about that?
Okay. I cannot overemphasize that the role of mentors. In my case, I continued. The mentors I had in HP, they were general managers. They went on to become CEOs of Silicon Valley companies, and very successful CEOs actually. So what I tried to do is, though I left HP, I continued that relationship. And before every major decision, like career change, going into a smaller company or starting some new idea, all of those changes, before I made any such decision, I would meet with them. So I'll give you an example. When I became the Ixia CEO, that was the first time public company CEO role. I had never done a investor briefing or never done a conference with the analyst. So before the call, I sat with one of these CEOs. What are the best practices? And these were my HP mentors, but now they were CEOs. And they gave me very good ideas of do's and don'ts. So this is a specific example where I'm sure I would have learned the same things the hard way, 2 years later. But by being with the mentors, you were able to pick some of the best practices. So my advice to each one of you is to absolutely make sure you have one or two mentors outside your company. Because inside the company, there are a level of discussions you can do, but beyond that, you will not feel comfortable. So having a mentor outside the company gives you total flexibility in discussing some sensitive situations or a tough dilemma you are in and you really want an independent opinion. So if you don't have, then develop that relationship. I continued. In fact, just about 2-3 months back, I met with, one of them has retired now, but he's on the board of a couple of companies. I met with him and I continue the relationship.
So you talked about taking risks and making transitions when appropriate, and one of the examples you gave was moving from R&D to product management. So can you give us some insight into how you've been able to make those transitions successful? And perhaps one or two of them were not as successful as you wanted, and what were the learning made?
Yeah, so the first transition I made was from R&D to product management / marketing. That was a tough transition. And as I said earlier, my goal was not to be the best in that. My goal was to learn enough that someday when I run a division or run a company, I know enough that I can't be fooled, number one. Number two, I can evaluate an idea with good tools. What I found is that from engineering to product management it demands a significant change. And I won't say that in that transition I became the best, but I picked up enough learnings that when I ended up being a general manager for a division, I knew who are good product managers. I knew what ideas are good. I knew what questions to ask. I had a template in terms of evaluating business plan. That much I picked up. Plus, as an engineer, we never got groomed in communications. Right? Nobody would sit with us and say, this is how you do a PowerPoint presentation. We put details, right, in every slide. And one of the first things you learn in marketing and product management is that the best presentations are few, succinct, and then you describe things more in detail. So I think there was a lot of those principles of communication, principles of interaction with customer, when to shut your mouth, when to push back, right? Because you have to push back with customers from time to time. And sometimes you have to know that this is a point you don't want to now push beyond this. A lot of those skills you pick up in those roles. Now those roles are very risky. So any of you who are thinking of making those changes, go with open eyes. Because places like HP were very supportive. And always make sure when you're making a transition like that, you have a strong mentor or a sponsor in the company, at least at a VP level or a GM level. If you are doing this transition without that level of sponsorship, it's too risky. Now, that shouldn't stop you, but you should, as I said, go with open eyes. So I thought that was a tough transition. Then from there, the next transition comes into sales. And that is also a tough transition, because sales is one of those things where you have to get a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed every day, no matter what happened yesterday. And that is not easy, right? Because you work 3 months on an RFP or on a project, and suddenly you lost the deal completely. 3 months worth is gone, you are behind quota, but you have to get up again and run again. So if you get discouraged easily, then the sales may not be the right function, and I'm sure Nick can attest to that. So, I developed a lot of respect for sales over time. That it looks, from our side, it looks kind of, all he does is collects POs. But no, it's not that. They do a lot beyond that. Getting finally that $1 million PO requires diligence, trust with customer, differentiation with competition, follow through, and really building a very strong relationship with customers. So it's not the only one PO, you have series of POs coming after that.
Atul, you talked about acquisitions and difference of cultures. So I'm sure even when you were working in Asia Pac, you saw a lot of differences in terms of how people were working or how the business models were. What was like the major differences that you noticed while working with different cultures? Also, what was like a common thread that you saw which could tie in all this together?
Excellent question. Every company I've worked for last 2 decades always had Asia, European operations, and I think the common thread I have found is actually very simple, and that is your innate respect for people. If you have innate respect for people as you deal with them, and if you listen well, generally you will transcend cultures and countries. But if you don't have those 2 skills, respect for people and the listening skills, and you start and it's your way or highway or just your presentation, you're not listening. And in HP we learned another thing which I want to talk briefly, which ties in with this, MBWA, management by walking around. Now many of us, as we work with the Asian team or European team, just don't forget the presentations in a conference room, just walk around the building. And suddenly people will come out, they'll introduce themselves, they'll share their ideas, and the barrier starts to come down. So my experience is that people may be shy in some cultures to start with, but if you take these few proactive steps, they are no different. So for most of you who are developing as leaders, or you are developing your company where R&D might be somewhere else, or sales operations might be somewhere else, if you just focus on those 2 things, respect for people and your ability to listen, and in a honest manner, not because it's a checklist item. and I need to do this checklist, I need to listen today. No, it's not that. People figure it very quickly. You know, those who are doing it genuinely and those who are irritated because this guy stopped you for 10 minutes now, right? I think, and you have so many good examples in Silicon Valley where leaders do it so well. So my experience is that those two things, if you do, you can transcend cultures, barriers. I have had the fortune of working with, you know, in China, in Singapore, in India, people in Europe, and I find that I don't actually, in some sense, I don't change too much between the cultures, but I keep those fundamental principles the same because it's much easier if you have the core. This is why I focused on the core values. I said vision and core values. Because if you set the core values and from CEO down, everyone follows those core values in a consistent manner, no exceptions, you will find that the company unifies faster than you think. On the other hand, if executives have a different core values, employees have a different core values, separate dining area for executives fly business class, employees fly coach, those are not core values in my mind. Suddenly you are saying one thing but you're doing something else. So in my book, I think if you keep those core values strong, employees will rebound very quickly. But also, if you're saying something, doing something else, employees are also the first one to know that you have duplicity.
Atul, you described two phenomena at HP. One was the highly collegial nature of senior management, and then the other one was this whole cell division concept, where actually business units then start fiercely competing with each other, and that strikes me as a very intriguing paradox. How did HP manage that paradox?
Yes. The interesting thing was that when they overlapped the divisions wouldn't have massive overlap, like 100% overlap. The overlap would be that one division is going after low end, second going mid-range, and once in a while the low end will creep into the mid-range a little bit. So it was not, maybe 10% overlap type. But what it did do though, is it kept everybody sharp. For example, if black and white printing was going in a significant manner, the color guys came and got inkjet color printing. Now the laser guys had to create color too. Because if they didn't create color, then they will get cannibalized by the mid and high range printing of the inkjet color. So that's just an example. I think overall, they could afford in those days because the R&D budgets, the margins, the competition, all those things are very favorable. Those things are very difficult to do now. Because now, if you have divisions, you're competing with China, or you're competing with other very, very competitive companies out there. So what I find is that in this day and age, the need for efficiency is so high that I'm not sure that is doable right now. Whereas in those days, the numbers were there, the dollars were there to succeed that way. So that's what I'm saying. Everything I'm describing, you have to evaluate. The life cycles are changing right now. What is applicable and what may not be applicable. But one thing is clear, that whatever you do, that the results need to be a lot faster now. The technologies are shifting a lot faster now. So experimentation time is a lot faster now versus what we had. And that's I think, key realization for folks who are especially in a startup mode. That now it's really throwing it there, let people try it, gain the usage, then figure out, and hopefully you're sharp enough to pick the monetization. Whereas the model in 80s and 90s, we had more time. So I would say, yeah, it's definitely a different paradigm right now.
Any other questions?
One question, you talked about harmony and how you tie everybody together when you go. But there could be examples where somebody is doing my way or highway. So if you come across somebody, how do you deal with it?
Yeah. Generally in my book, what I try to do is, I give a lot more leeway to a technical person on my way or highway. If the technical person is very insightful and has a proven track record with me, I would give leeway. Because people who are very accomplished, very detailed oriented, especially, and there's James Reeves there, he worked with me in Nortel, and we had many engineers who were very, very bright, very idiosyncratic, but they could produce 10 times average person's productivity, an order of magnitude. In my book, they earn the right to do my way or highway. And as a leader, I give a lot of air cover to them. Actually, you should provide a lot of air cover to them. But they earn that status with you after years of accomplishments. It's not 1 quarter or 2 quarters. But if I have a manager who does that, then I generally would go into pretty quickly the coaching mode first, and then figure out, maybe it may not be the right person. So there is delta. I think so. If you are evaluating this type of a situation, I think if you have a bright technical person, because that person has chosen to be an individual contributor. Whereas a manager has chosen to manage energies of 10 people or 12 people or 15 people. So the evaluation criteria is different. That's how and that seemed to have worked. Because if you are opening some new doors, you're going into social media, Web 2.0,